Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar today organized by TNO and the VNCI in the Netherlands on safe and sustainable by design. And I would like to especially welcome the audience because we have a great audience. You cannot see each other, we cannot see you, but we know that there's a lot of participants from many countries in Europe and representing various sectors in the chemical industry in Europe. I would like to start with the overview of what we're going to do today. So we have a short welcome of the participants. Then we will have two presentations on the background of SSBD. And we end the webinar within 1 hour with a panel discussion. And during the course of this webinar, you have the ability to ask questions. And please do that through the chat. We will see your questions popping up from the chat and we can ask them to the representatives who are in the audience today. So today we have Michiel van Kuppenveld. He works for the Association of the Dutch Chemical Industry as a policy advisor on chemicals legislation and on SSBD. He has a background in chemical engineering, material science and circular economy. And on the other side we have Hedwig Braakhuis. She works as a senior toxicologist at TNO and has a background in nanotoxicology and in vitro screening. Her current focus is on integrated approaches for safe and sustainable by design. And then online we have Katrien Santiso. She will be joining the panel discussion later on. And Katrien is working at CEFIC as a program manager of the CEFIC Long Range Research Initiative, the LRI program. She has a background in environmental chemistry, material science, fluid dynamics, contaminant, fate and transport, as well as contamination, attenuation and degradation at both academic and industry. So for the people who are not very acquainted with TNO, TNO is a research institute in the Netherlands. We develop fundamental knowledge together with university, but we also do knowledge development together with in public-private partnerships. Then we apply this knowledge through contract research with our clients. And we also have, finally, the knowledge transfer into spin-offs, spin-outs. We do this separated into 5 business units within TNO, and we mostly work from the healthy living and work unit, as well as the energy material transition unit. We are based in the Netherlands at various locations throughout the Netherlands. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce Michiel and give him the floor on his presentation.
Video.
Oh, sorry, we go to the video first, sorry. If companies embrace this approach, I think we all have the same goal in the end. I'm not concerned that any company would like to make a product that's damaging our environment. Of course, they don't want to do that.
There is a huge demand from society for novel materials, chemicals, products. And the challenge for industry is to look into the health, safety and sustainability aspects of all these novel chemicals and materials.
The speed of new innovations is higher than the level of risk assessment that we can perform. So we create an iceberg of chemicals that we have not evaluated yet.
So for example, the World Health Organization estimated that yearly about 2 million deaths can be attributed to chemical exposure. But in Europe there is specific legislation being promoted. Europe is really trying to push forward this toxic-free environment, preventing any hazardous chemicals from entering the market.
TNO can help product developers in providing the full scale of different parameters that underpin the decision that needs to be made to go to a next stage of innovation. And usually they look at functionality versus cost, and we would like to add safety and sustainability to that, to make a full scale criteria overview of all the parameters that should be included in a decision.
TNO is now developing an approach. We call this the Safe and Sustainable by Design approach, in which we really want to assess potential risks for both human and the environment very early on in the product innovation process.
So you always start with defining the product criteria for the intended use of the chemical material or product. Then we provide a quick screening of the selected SSBD aspects like health and safety, sustainability, functionality and cost, using the SSBD decision support tool that we have at TNO based on the available information and modeling. Then, based on this information, we provide a transparent visualization and integration of all the impacts of the different SSBD aspects. and finally make a decision based on the transparent visualization. And if necessary, more detailed evaluation of one or more of the SSBD aspects can be provided to get more insight into one of the parameters.
The idea is that with the Safe Sustainable by Design approach, we prevent harmful substances from entering the market, so that industries have an approach to really search for alternatives that have the same functionality without the hazardous properties.
So they usually say fail early, fail cheap. So once you know that something will never get to the market because of potential health risk, you better know it as soon as possible before you start making all the cost. And the second thing is the reputation damage that can be there for companies because they developed something in the past that caused effects to our environment and human health.
We believe TNO has a unique expertise in-house. SSBD really requires a multidisciplinary approach. So this means you need people to have expertise on material science, chemists, but also expertise on toxicology, epidemiology, sustainability, life cycle assessments, economical aspects. Everything should be integrated. And within TNO, we have for each different field, we have the experts in-house, so we can really work together and make this integration together and understand different use cases from different perspectives.
If there's a new product, we don't have data for that specific product. But what we do have is a database with a lot of product information from, let's say, similar products that are not exactly the same, but they may have the same properties. And there we can try to predict the toxicological effects or the effect on the environment based on related products. And of course then, if that's insufficient, we could also do laboratory tests, for instance, or do in vitro toxicity testing to really help the industry in getting the right toxicity data for their new product. And then, of course, into the future, we would like to further develop this and further refine this by collaborating with the industry and tailor it to their needs, because it's their tool and we would like to assist them in the transition that we need to make. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this introduction video, and without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Michiel van Kuppenveld from the Dutch Association of the Chemical Industry.
Thank you, Wouter. That surely was a nice video as a show of your SSBD approach. I'll tell something about the perspective from the industry on Safe Sustainable by Design. And with this title, New Connections for Chemistry, it's twofolded. On one hand, as you told in the video, we need new materials, new chemistry, so new chemical connections. But also, for Safe Sustainable by Design to do it on a good way, I think we also need new connections outside that. So maybe social connections or new connections in the value chain. Very short, Dutch Brand Association for Chemical Industry. Netherlands is quite a large country on chemical industry, about the 4th or the 5th place in Europe. Quite some turnover, a lot of cool innovative things happening. Just to give you a view, that is quite a large sector. Safe Sustainable by Design. Very shortly, so we know we shouldn't put persistent materials in a pizza box. That's not happening. The sustainability of the value chain. But what about if we do very complex work, very complex machines? Also, Safe Sustainable by Design should be able to do that with relevant insights. Make a good risk decision methodology combined with system analysis. So where's the biggest impact and where can we improve? Of course, the aim for us for Safe Sustainable by Design is a cleaner and safer environment with the use of chemistry. And I'll make this pitch. Why not see it as a trademark for the Dutch chemical industry? Well, why SSBD now? There's quite of an urgency. There is a challenge for unhealthy materials all around us. Sometimes we don't know enough about them. This feeling of insufficient control of substances in our environment. And we, of course, all know the planetary boundaries. And the one for novel entities is quite in the red, which is not a good thing, which we can solve with all the capacities of the chemical industry and the value chain. There also was the Green Deal. And then now we have the Draghi report. You see the competitiveness in the European Union is in decline. The surge in clean tech needed, and there are talks of industry policy. And you see here the graph, the lowest line is the the output for the chemical industry. So it's not all well. It would be very great if Safe Sustainable by Design could combine the Green Deal with this industrial policy to bridge for a way forward, so that we kind of have the best of both worlds. So what is therefore needed? What Lego blocks do we need to build for safe, sustainable solutions? Of course, innovation is needed. The methodology, which will be talked and discussed about later, need to be applicable for everybody working in chemistry. The students at the lab, small companies, large companies. So to prevent paralysis by analysis, if we have an endless quest for data, it's not going to help. We need some kind of good decision-making support. So really happy that TNO is working on that. However, complexity should not be avoided. We have artificial intelligence coming up. We have molecular design, a lot of opportunities there. But it should be placed at the right people. People who do complex stuff should deal with complexity. And maybe further down the value chain, people are more for a direct approach. And there, of course, is cooperation needed. So new connections. And then we make a beautiful work. Is it safe, sustainable by design? Well, maybe we find out in 5 years we needed just another one. The other side of the story. We wanted this. We didn't talk to everybody. We didn't consider the whole value chain. So in order to do that, for me, there's also a mindset change needed. A mindset by scientists, process and product developers, on the plants, but also in the boardrooms, at the government, for the citizens. We deal with materials in our modern world. We deal with chemicals. We do that as best as we can. But therefore, there's a connection needed also for welfare, security, and competitiveness, because we want to do it in Europe. We don't want to be dependent on important technologies for other parts of the world. So working together on these circular solutions by design, I think that requires team effort indeed, and a good weighing system. Circular, safety, social, sustainability, and luckily it's all in the framework, but how to make it operationable, applicable for the chemical industry, I think that's the question now we're facing. If we look at the Netherlands, so Netherlands is quite a small country, as most of you know. Competitiveness and investments are challenging now. And there's very ambitious transition to a sustainable society, which is very good because it gives floor for innovations. We have a well-connected chemical ecosystem, and there's know-how and skills available. So Dutch design molecules is a bit as a joke to the Dutch design days in Eindhoven, which are very popular. Why not do safe, sustainable by design as a trademark for the Dutch chemical industry? So how to do that? How to operationalize this? Well, you see what Lego bricks to build. This one has some substances of very high concern. A starting material, but it gives a product that lasts kind of forever, and it's safe for children to play with. So how to make these choices? Well, there's a lot of happenings going on now, a lot of development. For example, European Union is a leader in the Safe Sustainable Guide. Also CEFIC, the European Chemical Association, is a lot of nice examples also on how to get started with Safe Sustainable by Design. There's in the Netherlands just published an essay building from 7 different perspectives on this subject. The Dutch Research Council is doing a lot. For the VNCI, for example, there's also the material transition. So how do we transfer from mineral oils to other feedstocks, and how is that affecting the plant, the processes you do, but also the products you make? And for example, IRIS, the Europe network of SSBD, just last week published a roadmap for operationalization of SSBD. So there's a lot of things going on. So safe, sustainable by design, a nice to have or a must have. I think from our perspective, it's a must have for the chemical industry. There's many opportunities. Innovation is needed. It's going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be one we can take. The key now is to operationalize it, to really change things at the ground. Starting points are available, and small steps are leading to great results, I think. So this little picture, if you just try to start with it, to see what you can do, you're already doing good. And then one last slide. If you really don't know where to start, there's this map from the Dutch government, which is for everyone available. What are tips for companies to start? It's interesting. You can print it out and put it on display somewhere, maybe in your canteen. And with that, I say safe, sustainable by design for Dutch design molecules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michiel, for this wonderful overview from the chemical industry. Today we focus our webinar on the pragmatic implementation of SSBD in industry, so this is a very valuable topic. And we get an overwhelming number of questions, so thank you for that, and please keep on posting your questions in the chat so that we can deal with them during the webinar. And the first question is, maybe you can already give some insights in what's been done in the Netherlands on SSBD by Dutch companies.
Thanks for the question, Wouter, and the audience. It's not starting from zero for safe, sustainable by design for the Dutch chemical industry. We do risk evaluation for a long time, sustainability, life cycle assessments, applying that to your portfolio. Companies are doing that already, and there's really a startup scene from how to use waste materials as value new feedstock, for example, for chemical recycling or for new bio-based products. And with this, I hope, operationalization step of the framework, I think a whole broad group of companies can really make progress on this subject and not just the front runners.
Thank you very much. And we also have SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises online. And of course, it may be challenging for them, or maybe even more challenging than the bigger industry. So can you elaborate a bit more on what especially the smaller-sized companies could do in applying SSBD?
Yes, I can. And then there was also a research conducted by the Dutch government on SMEs. And it's really shown that the drive for this transition is quite large in SMEs, because they have often a very flexible innovation process. They can make nice products for the market, and so they often have safe, sustainable by design or sustainable operations in their DNA. They think we need to live beyond this generation, as to say. So often you see that these are doing great efforts with their resources, what they can. So I would advise them to show to the information, to go to the information I've shown. But I think there are quite some SMEs which are already quite good on the road, as to say, with this subject.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And there's another question and you already hinted in your presentation on the great benefits and advantages that SSBD could have for the Dutch chemical industry, and we could potentially be a front runner, as you said, within Europe. So can you please elaborate a bit more on the opportunities that there are for the Dutch sector?
Yes, I think there are many opportunities. We have in the Netherlands a quite well-connected chemical ecosystem, so scientists talking to policymakers, talking to industry partners, subsidies where SMEs or a lot of knowledge can come together. And we have also the hardware in the Netherlands. We have in Rotterdam, or in Camelot, or in the north of the country, factories which are run and built as safe and sustainable as possible. And because we are small, we also need to change. We need to put this transition forward. Mm-hmm. So I think on the one side, we have this push, on the other side, we have these many possibilities. So for me, that's the hope, that we can embrace this and work together on a more sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question on another sector. So you gave some examples of chemical products, but could it also be applied to batteries, for instance, to another application?
Very interesting. Yes, if it is not a too narrow or too dogmatic framework, I think it can be applied to any product we have. Chemistry is everywhere. About 95% of the products around us are based on chemistry or chemical processes. So also a battery, and if we because the SSBD is really now thought out how to do it, and if you do it in a proper way, I think it's gonna be applicable also for batteries. How to make these sustainable, circular, and safe to reuse, for example.
Mm-hmm. And are you aware of the benign by design chemistry term that was developed earlier on? Was that the starting point for SSBD, or is that related?
The benign by design, I think I showed a picture of the Dutch Research Council, NWO. They are coupling benign by design really on safe, sustainable by design. For me, it's a bit a semantic question. We want to do chemistry, we want to do chemistry the best way we can. And if it's benign design or safe, sustainable by design, I think it's more about the mindset.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. These were all the questions that were posed, and I'd like to move on. Thank you very much, Michiel, for your presentation. And I would like to give the floor now to Hedwig, who will present TNO's work.
Thank you. So I would like to present to you in a bit more detail TNO's approach for safe, sustainable by design. As a start, I've listed some of novel European ambitions and regulations that are put in place to go for this, strive for more healthy and sustainable society. And I want to highlight the chemical strategy for sustainability, which is pushing forward to minimize and substitute harmful substances, and also the eco-design for sustainable products regulation, which is aiming for more transparency on products, for example, including a digital product passport on repairability, and also on substances of concern that are used within in products. So how can Europe implement all these novel regulations and ambitions? As already presented by Michiel, there are quite some novel documents available on safe, sustainable by design, which can be a solution to implement these ambitions and strive for a Europe that is more healthy and more sustainable without hampering innovation. So there are 3 different documents available from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I've put them here on the slide. So there's the framework, some case studies, and a methodological guidance. And in addition to that, there's also a guidance from CEFIC, the European Chemical Association. So as was also explained in the video earlier on, safe, sustainable by design is essentially that you take safety and sustainability considerations into account very early onwards in the innovation process. And I think everybody is aware of this and also thinks this is a great concept. But indeed, as also highlighted by Michiel earlier on, it's not that easy to implement this approach. So there are quite some hurdles for industry to implement safe, sustainable by design as it is now put forward. So if you look into all these initiatives, so also from several European projects that produce very nice tooling and methodologies, all these initiatives are quite scattered. So there's no harmonized, standardized, safe, sustainable by design approach that can easily be implemented at a company. There's also no clear legislation on SSBD because it's a voluntary pre-market approach. There's also uncertainty how to integrate all the different aspects related to performance, health, safety, sustainability, and show these trade-offs. There are resource constraints because it does require some investments early in the innovation process. And there's a need for quite some data to do a very comprehensive SSBD assessment during your innovation. This also requires close collaboration within a supply chain, so from raw material producer to formulator to manufacturing of an end product. And it's not that easy to get your data for example, from downstream or upstream your supply chain. And it requires a multidisciplinary expertise because you need the expertise on all the different safe, sustainable by design aspects to come to a decision. Well, besides all these hurdles, there are major benefits, as already pointed out. I think the major benefit is that we together still want to innovate and have novel materials, for example, for energy transition. But at the same time, we want to prevent problems, health problems, environmental damage, which will be of great benefit for Europe and hopefully for the whole world in the end. For companies, specifically, it can save costs. It can prevent reputational damage, that you do not put anything on the market that will cause some damage later on. And you can be prepared for future regulations. So what does the TNO, Safe Sustainable by Design approach look like? It was already briefly explained in the video. So as a first step, we start on the left. You select design criteria. These depend a lot on the sector or the product you would like to produce. And this can also include a substitution question. So for example, there's currently a PFAS in a product and you like to substitute it with a less harmful alternative. So you put here the design criteria, performance criteria, safety, sustainability criteria, costs. Then you go to step 2, where you do a quick screening based on available data and some tooling to fill data gaps. Then in step 3, there's a visualization of all the different aspects. And then in step 4, if you go down, you gather all the relevant expertise to use the information for decision making. And as said before, you can gather, of course, more detailed information if needed, also depending on which stage you are in the innovation cycle. So to give a more detailed example, we applied this approach to solar panels. So conventionally, solar panels, the absorber layer that converts the sunlight to electricity consists of silicon. So this can be, for example, a combination of amorphous and microcrystalline silica. And this silicon is not that efficient, and it can also be quite costly to produce. And that's why industry is moving towards perovskites. This is a kind of crystal structure which can consist of different metals and chemical compositions, which is much more effective in converting the solar energy into electrical energy. And it's also cheaper to produce. So in step 1, we selected together with the company the relevant criteria for the SSBD assessment. So this is looking into efficiency of a solar cell, degradation rate, and the lifetime, because a solar panel should be on your roof for at least 20 years. Looking into health safety aspects, like the chemical and the physical risks, looking into the life cycle assessment and sustainability impacts, and costs of the materials and the production. Then we did a quick screening. So here you see the surface lifetime of different materials and a quick LCA scan compared to a market reference, and the identification of points of attention related to potential health and environmental risks. Then we go to the visualization. So this is quite a complex overview. So first I will explain to you this in a schematic way. So you see here on the right in the lower block, the design block in orange. So this is where you make your design choices, and you can have different scenarios on your design. So in this case, the silicon versus the perovskite. Then you see in green all the blocks with the safe, sustainable by design aspects. So based on the design, you have different sustainability impacts, different performance, and different costs related to that. That feeds into this system layer where the trade-offs will be made visible. And then from the top, in this pink or purple color, there are the different stakeholders. So this could be a chief financial officer or a technology officer stating different criteria for sustainability or for cost of producing such a panel. So this is what it looks like if you use the software. So I will zoom in specifically for the decision-making, step 4, on this blue layer, the system layer, where all the trade-offs can be made visible. So if we zoom in on the silicon-based solar cells, so the conventional product, you see on the bottom all the inputs into the system layer from sustainability, health, safety, performance, and cost. And from the top, there are the wishes from the stakeholders. And you see that there's these traffic lights with green, orange, and red indicating if they are in agreement, yes or no. So for example, if you look into the left, there's an issue on recycling because the sustainability officer likes to produce a panel that can be recycled, whereas the current silicon-based solar panels cannot be recycled. For performance, there's also an issue because the technology officer likes to have a higher efficiency, which cannot be achieved by this type of solar cell. And also the costs are now too high for producing. So then we go to the next scenario, the perovskite-based solar cells, and you see some changes below in the traffic lights. So now you see that some turned from red to green. So now this is a panel that could be made that it's possible to recycle. Also the performance is now sufficiently high, and also the costs are reduced. However, there are some issues with stability because the perovskite panels are less stable compared to the silicon-based ones. And there's an issue on hazard because typically in these perovskites there are also lead is used, which is a toxic metal. And What's important here to understand is that this is not an assessment you do in isolation. So you need all the stakeholders, like the sustainability officer, the CTO, the CFO. You need all the expertise, so all the green blocks have a dedicated owner and responsible person that's at the table providing the relevant information, because decision making is not about a single number, it's about the conversation you have together and about the trade-offs, that you transparently show the trade-offs and have a discussion on how to move forward. Of course, this is not only an in-company approach. There are several other stakeholders that affect decisions that can be made by companies. So, for example, investors, for them also these trade-offs are very insightful, because it can help to see if it's worthwhile to invest in a novel technology or not. It can also help in communication to local residents or consumers, to transparently show potential impacts of a novel technology, or maybe if you have a novel factory close to residents. For the workers, this can help to improve worker safety. Policymakers are very interested in showing these trade-offs, for example, to look into restricted substances and see if there are essential uses for which a harmful substance could be used, for example, in a circular way, that there's no exposure. Universities help to produce the tooling and methodology to perform the SSBD assessments. Branch organizations like VNCE, CEFIC, they help their members from industry to implement SSBD, and you get more agreement on the approaches to use, so that companies have a more level playing field. And legislators, they can use SSBD to move forward for their regulations. So, and as a next step in our safe, sustainable by design approach, we further support companies in implementing SSBD and trying to make this as practical as possible, and focus mainly on this integration and showing these trade-offs to have an honest decision and a more objective discussion on SSBD and what is a good decision to move your product or your chemical forward. We also invest in data-driven methodologies to further fill data gaps, because early in the innovation process there's very little data available, and you need to have more reliable tooling and methods to predict potential health effects or sustainability impacts along the life cycle. We also work on the development of in vitro screening methods, so this is for a bit later into the innovation cycle. For example, in case you have complex materials for which there's very little data available and also predictive tools are not accurate enough, then it might be needed to quickly screen something in the lab for any potential toxicity. And finally, we also want to increase awareness on SSBD and make sure that both society, consumers, but also the industry and from universities, everybody is aware of SSBD and that they can contribute, so that we all together can cooperate and make this a success. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hedwig, for this wonderful overview of the TNO research in SSBD. And it's great to see these overwhelming questions coming into the chat. So please keep on doing that. It's great for the discussion later on. There's a lot of questions related to the socioeconomic part of sustainability, which is challenging, and I can see that. Do you have any reflection on how that's being incorporated in TNO system?
Yeah, that's a very good and relevant question. At the moment, we do not have this incorporated yet, but we are working on a novel LCA methodology in which we try to combine all the different aspects, so the environmental aspects, the social and the economic aspects, into a single assessment, and also to make it more lean and practical, that it fits the early stages of SSBD. But this is indeed a very relevant question.
Thank you. And then there's a bunch of questions on microplastics specifically. So can you tell us a bit on whether microplastics is also incorporated in this SSBD, or whether that's different from SSBD?
That's also a very relevant question, and also quite difficult to tackle, because microplastics are, of course, not intentionally designed. What happens with microplastics, they're being released during the life cycle of a plastic product. What you can do within a safe, sustainable by design approach is think about designing a polymer in such a way that it does not release microplastics that easily, or that it degrades completely instead of causing the release of these microplastics. So that's a way how safe, sustainable by design can be applied to microplastics.
Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few people enthusiastic about TNO's system, and they ask questions on how they can have access to this system or how they can collaborate with TNO in terms of licensing or collaborations. Can you tell a bit more on how we collaborate?
Yeah, we are very happy to collaborate to further refine the approach. So we are still further refining and developing the approach. And I think we can best cooperate, for example, with case studies. So if you are working at a company and think of a specific case study, we can cooperate and include the case study within our approach and see how it works out and what kind of trade-offs become visible depending on the case you send in, because it's quite sector-specific, the challenges that you will encounter. You can imagine it's completely different for the solar panel case, what we just saw, compared to a food packaging material. So we are looking for industry to collaborate and together sit down to define these criteria, show the trade-offs, and have a discussion on that. Mm-hmm. So you're more than welcome to contact us.
And then there's, again, a lot of questions from SMEs, so I'm happy that these are also online because I can see their struggle in time and effort and money. So can you maybe give a brief example of how much time you dedicated, for instance, to this solar case study, or how much time it will cost a company to do this, and do they need help, or can they do that on themselves?
Yeah, also a nice question. I think in this specific solar cell case, what helped is that there is quite a lot of data available on solar cells in this typical case study. So for this case study, it didn't take that much time. So for the company, I think we sat down maybe 3 or 4 times, usually just 1 hour each time. There was only one afternoon session we had, so that was from company side quite limited time investment needed. And from TNO side, we needed a bit more time to gather all relevant data. But I think, if you compile it all together with an investment of like 1 week, you can already have your preliminary SSBD assessment.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to SSBD, we know that there's also substitution, so trying to find alternatives for existing chemicals. Do you see a relation between SSBD and substitution, or is this different?
Yeah, I definitely see a relation there. Sometimes SSBD is explained for innovating like totally novel products, chemicals or materials. And of course then SSBD applies because you can design something completely novel from the start. But it also applies, of course, to current products in a portfolio of a company where you can check for sustainability impacts or safety, potential health or safety impacts of your current portfolio, and select those products that might be worthwhile to substitute a specific chemical within that product. And also looking into chemicals that are over time being restricted. Those also require an action to substitute with a less harmful alternative. So think about BPA or PFAS. And then also the SSBD approach can be used to compare the conventional product with the chemical that might be restricted to the product with an alternative material in it.
Mm-hmm. And there seem to be a lot of people from the, let's say, the solvents industry online. So these question whether we have already experiences with replacing solvents by less harmful.
We do have some experience with solvents. We actually built a database which contains a lot of solvents. So this database contains over 1 million chemical substances, including over 60 physical chemical parameters and also toxicity information on these compounds. And we use this database to build a chemical replacement tool that is now mostly applicable to solvents, but we are expanding it also to other sectors. Mm-hmm. So this is a database we can use to help the search for alternative solvents that are more safe and sustainable by design.
Mm-hmm. And then the final question, sorry, we cannot answer all the questions, but you can, of course, contact us after the webinar and we can answer all the other questions. Final question that also bridges into the panel discussion, I think, is Michiel already explained that, let's say, there's different frameworks from the JRC, from CEFIC. Can you explain, let's say, the overlap or the difference of TNO's approach considering the other approaches?
Yeah, also a good question. I think, but this is also a bit my personal point of view, that the JRC framework is trying to be very comprehensive. So it also splits the design phase versus the SSBD assessment. So you first design and then you do an assessment. Well, I think it's better to integrate this. And being so comprehensive, I think that's on the one side very good. So you're aware of all the aspects that you need to take into consideration. On the other hand, it becomes very hard to implement and gather all this data for all these aspects. I think it's more helpful if you select those that have the highest impact on either safety or sustainability instead of focusing on all in one go. What I like about the CEFIC guidance is that it provides much more practical guidance. So there's a clear link to design criteria. So there's the focus in when you are in different stages of the innovation cycle, which data together to collect and when, and also how to link it to different design principles. So it also gives you more actions to consider. I think what is different from our approach is that we also include all the different expertise and people into the whole SSBD assessment, because we believe it's not something you can easily do on your own. It's more about having the dialogue and having a very transparent overview of all the impacts that you then can discuss with, within a company.
Thank you very much. As I said, this was a final question. I would like to reintroduce Catherine Santizo, and it's great that she can join online to share her experiences from the European chemicals industry, CEFIC. Can you first of all, Catherine, introduce us into what CEFIC is and what it does?
Hi, Wouter. Thank you for inviting me, and happy to be here on behalf of the CEFIC network of experts on SSBD and my colleague who actually leads that. So for those that don't know CEFIC, CEFIC is the forum of the chemical industry in Europe. And as Wouter mentioned, I'm here located and coming from Brussels. And we represent large, medium, and small companies in Europe with a strong network and collective expertise. Specifically on SSBD, CEFIC has a network of experts that has been continuously working on an industry vision to implement SSBD principles into the industrial innovation processes. And as Michael and Hedwig already mentioned, we have a guidance document that was published in March of 2024, so this year. But we had also published two previous documents in October of 2021 and April 2022. So we're actively working with our experts to find ways to implement the SSBD principles in the chemical industry across Europe.
Thanks very much, Catherine. And of course, we welcome all your efforts together with what we do in the Netherlands on trying to implement SSBD in the industry. Can you maybe reflect a bit on, you heard the presentations by Michiel and Hedwig, on the role that they have in the Netherlands and maybe also for the European network?
Yeah, so I think both presentations kind of touched on a lot of aspects that we as a network have also discussed at CEFIC. And so thinking about the collaborations and the large need of expertise that's needed, it's multidisciplinary. So it's great to hear that there's a lot of overlap in the thoughts, both from Michiel at VNCI and Hedwig at TNO. I think, some of the aspects that were mentioned on making it pragmatic and easy to approach so that it can actually be implementable across the sector. And as you mentioned, some of the SMEs can see this maybe as a hurdle, but making it pragmatic and easy to use enables it to be used across size, but also across the sectors. And so we also see that as a need. And we also appreciate the highlight of trade-offs and the sectorial approach. I think when we talk about SSBD, and Hedwig rightfully pointed out, there is the needs are going to be different based on the process, the material, and so there are trade-offs that need to be in the discussion. And how do you then handle the safety, the sustainability, the design criteria, the recyclability that were also highlighted.
Yeah. And this nicely links to a question that just came in via the chat, is exactly on these trade-offs or let's say absolute thresholds. There's a lot of debate on whether we should go for an integrative approach that balances the trade-offs and gets the best optimum, or whether we should go for, let's say, legal limits or absolute trade-offs. And maybe, well, of course, the others can join in, but maybe first to you, Katrien, how do you feel we should go forward?
I think that it's a little bit of a challenge when we talk about thresholds, because we do really see the need for a multi-parameter approach, so this integrated approach. And also when we talk about thresholds, defining thresholds becomes also a discussion point, especially when we talk about different sectors and different needs. And so we see it, a combination might lead to an increased complexity when we discuss thresholds. So when we have our discussions, we really prefer a case-by-case decision. So this integrated approach that I think Hedwig mentioned a little bit or touched a little bit upon.
How do you see this same question, Michiel, from the Dutch society?
I agree with Katrien. I think using thresholds make it less flexible and a bit more dogmatic. And in the end, you want to make a life cycle or a system analysis. And from that perspective, you need to take, well, as we discussed, quite some points of view with you, and then you can make the best solution. And I think using thresholds or focusing on thresholds is just not helping this the safe, sustainable by design operationalization.
And Hedwig, you have a lot of experience now with companies and industries in the Netherlands, but also in Europe. What do you see now as the major hurdle for making the next step in SSBD?
I think there are different hurdles to tackle, also depending whether we talk about larger companies or smaller companies. I think the major hurdle would be the uncertainties about SSBD approach and how to implement it and what it means later on. So now if you are for a responsible company and want to invest in this, it's not certain that your investment will be worthwhile because it's not completely clear how the SSBD approach will be looked upon when you are further along in your innovation cycle. I think this uncertainty makes it complex because, to make it more specific, there's no clear SSBD approach or methodology that you can use. So one company can go for a life cycle assessment in version 1, and the other can do version 2, and they get completely different results because it's not standardized. So this gives a very uncertain future profile to companies. So they are asking for more standardization in the field, so there's a more equal level playing field.
Mm-hmm. And maybe a question to you, Michiel, because there were a lot of questions from SMEs on the cost and the energy that it takes. So what do you feel is let's say realistic? How much time and effort can they invest, and who should pay that price?
Yeah, I think it's also one of the hurdles, of course, costs, and also market uptake of these safe, sustainable solutions. If it stays on the shop and no one buys it, then it's not good. I tried it myself actually to do the SSBD just for a shampoo to see how far I could get, and I got stuck pretty well now after about 2 hours, and I thought, okay. So for me, I think it's pretty hard exercise if you're not an expert of have already an existing model as TNO has. So the framework of what it's going to be needs to be pragmatic, and of course, everybody has a responsibility, also SMEs, and in their portfolio analysis, which I'm sure they are doing, this comes, maybe it adds up, this is something extra, but I think in the long run, as you showed, Hedwig, also in your presentation, it can save costs and time, because regulations, you're maybe less surprised if some chemicals are restricted. You got maybe a more future-proof business, but that is with the note that then the policy field around it should be designed in such a way that safe, sustainable by design, is good for your business case.
Yeah, and thanks again for the online audience for sending in so many questions, and we can of course not deal with them all, but we try to do our best to handle them in the panel discussion. And there's a lot of questions related to, let's say, a trademark or a qualification of SSBD. Katrien, can you maybe reflect on, should we go as far as implementing a trademark for SSBD?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think it's a challenging question, especially maybe at the moment and where SSBD is, and really considers further evaluation, specifically when we talk about resources and who certifies. And so I think, in our discussions, if this comes up, there's always a preference for a third-body certification. But we really think it needs further evaluation, at least from where SSBD is at the moment.
How do you see that, Hedwig, on a trademark?
I think also a trademark is quite challenging because of all the differences between sectors and the lack of a clear standardized approach at the moment. And I think the regulations that are currently in place are very protective, right? Like the REACH regulation and also the ESPR that's coming up. I think what's important is to have a more common agreement on when do we consider as consumer society, industry, policymakers, something sufficiently SSBD. And I do not think we need a trademark for that, but we need a more common understanding of what should be assessed early on.
And what would be, Michiel, from your side, the next step? So what's the action plan for the coming years from your society?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a good point. I think that's also a lot of discussion about that. First of all, the GRC framework, of the European framework, as to say, I think it will be completed next year for version 1. So then we have that in place. Also, I showed some examples how companies can dig for themselves, because, well, to come back to the previous question, I think a trademark will not be helping, because then you look at someone else to see what you have to do, or it becomes a tick in the box exercise. But you should think about your company with a certain mindset, that SSBD mindset, from how can we achieve this? And maybe there are some small steps you can already take. So that's for the company's perspective. And I think that the bigger step is, well, if you want to implement it, the people to use it, and there need to be an economic profile to it. So I showed the Draghi report in the beginning. A lot of innovation is needed in Europe to sustain ourselves. So make use of it and use safe, sustainable by design to really make this transition, couple it to the energy transition, for example, to our whole materials transition. So there's so many innovative opportunities right now. And if you want to do it really right, you have to use SSBD. So in that sense, I think growing the, I would say, oil field, but growing the sense of SSBD around the different areas is really helping. And yeah, look at yourself. What can you do?
And Hedwig, there's people asking, so you showed a generalized approach, but can this also be sector-specific or company-specific, or is it a general framework?
I think what we aim for is, on the one side, a general framework, because there are specific aspects that need to be considered every time over again. So the sustainability, health, safety, performance and cost, they will be assessed independent of the sector or the product. But what will be different or sector specific are the questions underlying those aspects. So you have different sustainability aspects and impacts depending on different production processes for different sectors, or different performance criteria, of course, depending on different products. So it's more of the questions and criteria underneath that.
And maybe Catherine, to finish off the panel discussion, because we're running out of time, unfortunately, but maybe you can give the vision of CEFIC on SSBD. So what's your action plan on a European level for the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of still ongoing work, but I think we second Michael's points on making it pragmatic, lean, and very practical for the application in the industry. We believe that it can ensure global competitiveness, as was also mentioned, but we need to avoid isolated solutions and make sure it aligns not only with European standards, but global standards for those that are in the global market, of course. And so we need to, enable that, and as well as secure the data sharing. So I know about protecting intellectual property. I know that that's part of the discussion that Hedwig mentioned early on about the data needs. And so this is obviously something that is still being discussed on how do you share data while protecting the intellectual property. So working on how can we enable that is something that's we're having in discussion here.
Thanks very much. And yeah, we unfortunately come to an end of this webinar already. I think it was a great new initiative to further engage in the discussion around SSBD, like others also do. I was overwhelmed by the number of people that have put in questions in the chat, but also registered for this webinar. So that shows that there's a lot of interest in SSBD and try to move this forward. The key insights that I received today is that especially SMEs or the smaller industries are struggling to get this implemented, and I feel that we need to help them. And also to maybe link up SSBD with substitution and to find, let's say, sector-specific solutions that can be really applied. But I think there's great interest, and there's a lot of people enthusiastic on moving this forward. Of course, we're happy to answer any remaining questions that were posed in the chat or that you have after the webinar. And please feel free to contact us. Also, a survey is on the screen now that you can fill, and you can further elaborate on, engage with our society and see how we can move this forward. I would reiterate what Hedwig already expressed from TNO side. We're mainly interested in supporting the industries on implementing SSBD in the industry sectors, especially in the SMEs and also in the larger industries. To do that, we need to develop models, data-driven, AI-driven models to predict toxicity, sustainability in the early phases of innovation. In the absence of data, we may need to generate data by in vitro toxicity testing. And also, of course, and this is, of course, doing this through this webinar, is to create awareness of this issue. And of course, we would like to assist industries in doing this. I would like to thank the presenters of today, Michiel van Kuppenveld from the Dutch Association for the Chemical Industry, Hedwig Braakhuis from TNO, and Catherine Santizo from CEFIC LRI, for this wonderful webinar and for your experiences. And we hope to be in contact soon. Thank you very much.